Alright, what's up guys and welcome back to Fab Unofficial. In this video, I'm going to be going over my top 5 equipment in the game. Obviously, Dusk Till Dawn hasn't officially released. This video will be going out the day before spoilers, the day of spoilers. I live in the future, so who knows exactly where it's going to come out. But obviously this is not including Dusk Till Dawn, so we don't know what we're going to get in that set. Maybe an equipment sneaks its way onto the list, but as of right now, recording this video, these are going to be my top 5 equipment released so far in Flesh and Blood. But before we dive in, obviously if you guys are enjoying the videos, please like and subscribe, definitely helps out. And obviously I needed to put some criteria together when judging equipment, so I want to go over how I did that and what I'm sort of looking at when I put this list together. 3 things mainly. So number 1, when you're talking about the top 5 equipment, is obviously the ceiling of the card. And by that, what I mean is, in the best case scenario, how balls to the wall busted is that card? Like, how much output are you getting? Where can it go? And how crazy can things get? So number 1 thing, ceiling of the card. Second is consistency. So the second thing I'm looking for is, how frequently can you reach that ceiling? And not only that, but overall, what's the average performance of the equipment? So even if you don't reach that ceiling, on average, what are you sort of getting out of it? And the third is accessibility, right? I think some equipment can be really, really powerful in very specific use cases, or by one singular hero, mainly because it's stamped with a class and a talent and all these extra parameters around playing it. So the third thing I'm looking about is accessibility, like how narrow is its use case and what's the hero pool that has access to that card or will have access to it in the future. So those are the 3 things that I'm looking at. And before we dive into the actual top 5 list, I do have an honorable mention that didn't quite make the top 5. But that is the absolute all-star. Welcome to Wraith. First go-to legendary Find Spring Tunic. So obviously this is the heralded chess piece that every hero has access to. And the reason why it's kind of an honorable mention and didn't make the top 5 is because the ceiling isn't super high, right? Depending on how long the game goes, you're probably getting 3 to 6 points of value out of it, maximum. But it is super consistent, right? Spring Tunic does what Spring Tunic does, and it always does it. You know what you're getting from it when you suit up. So yeah, you can't really ask more than that. And you can't get more accessible, right? It's a generic piece, which means, unless they print some hero with some restriction on it, every hero printed is going to have access to this card. So it definitely wins on consistency and accessibility, but because of the ceiling on the card, it didn't make the top 5 list. But I did want to give it an honorable mention because you can tell from a lot of deck lists that you'll see flying around the internet that Find Spring Tunic is a mainstay. So get that out of the way and we can move into the top 5, and I'll be starting from number 5. And that is maybe a hot take, but for me, I looked through all the equipment, and for me, number 5, Courage of Bladehold. So this is an equipment that was released back in Crucible of War, and it doesn't see tons of play, but that's not because the card isn't good. It's because I think the warrior class over the last little while, especially with Oldham floating about in the metagame, hasn't been at its best. But this card is so good, right? It only specifically works, its ability only specifically works with swords. But the fact that you can crack this at will to gain resources or effectively reduce the cost of swinging your swords is amazing. In a class that's built around its weapons, the ability on any given turn to crack this and have essentially free weapon swings, or I guess potentially in the future just reduce cost weapon swings, is amazing. It means that you can be more efficient with your resources and pour them into other cards that are going to help extend those turns. And when we go back to sort of the 3 keys that I was looking at, consistency, it's obviously super consistent. And not only that, but as a temper equipment, you're guaranteed to get minimum 3 points out of this card. And as a ceiling, we've seen Courage of Bladehold do some absolutely busted things in tandem with Luminarch Ascension and some Bolton decks. So the ceiling's definitely there. And as it's just a generic warrior equipment, obviously accessibility, any warrior moving forward is going to have access to this card. So really, really good card. I definitely think it makes the top 5, but it was a toss-up for that 5th spot. So I could definitely see, after you guys have seen the other cards on the list, potentially having some other options that could slot in there. It was by no means an easy pick down there in that 5th slot. But number 4 is the Ninja Headpiece, Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. So there was another headpiece that I was also looking at in Mask of Momentum, but Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, I think it's probably, more ingrained in people's minds because, Fi was definitely a thing not too long ago, and it's still a really good deck. And Mask of the Pouncing Lynx is a card that has been banned in certain formats because of its power level, right? Again, in terms of consistency, you're always going to get 2 block out of this card if you want it. But on those big turns, it sits there as a guaranteed just extra card. And in combination with things like Salt the Wound, for instance, you can pop this Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, and I have seen it be worth up to 7-8 points of value in a single card, which you start in play. So absolutely insane, if you ask me. I definitely think it is, fitting for the number 4 spot on this list. Now, the top 3, as we move into them, it was no consideration for me. These are the 3 equipment that I look at as the best equipment LSS has released ever, hands down. There was quite a big jump for me from 5-4 to the top 3. But I will say that the order in which of these I can imagine people debating, but this is how I feel. And in the 3rd spot, we have Spellbound Creepers. Now, you've seen me talk about this on the channel before. I'm a massive Runeblade fan, and this card is busted. There is a wall of text, which I'm not going to go over now, but, at a minimum, you can get a cheeky 1 point of block value out of it. But in terms of the ceiling on this card and the ability to, gain extra action points, and I should say it's gain extra action points, right? Like a lot of people look at this card as, effectively like a Snapdragon Scalers. But it's way better than that if you build your deck around it. And I think as the card pool increases, Runeblades are going to have a much easier time just doing more and more busted things with this card. Not only that, but it's not a one-stop shop, right? You don't sacrifice Spellbound Creepers to use its ability. You simply put a Spellbind counter on it, and all you need to do is have dealt 1 arcane damage in that turn to keep it around and use it again. And that's the thing that tips it over the edge, the ceiling, right? You don't get to just have 1 busted turn using this card, gaining extra action points, going super wide, but you get to rinse and repeat and, come back again. All made a lot easier with a lot of tools that Runeblade has, things like Rosetta Thorn, for instance. So the ceiling's super high. Again, it is a generic Runeblade. It's not tied to a talent, which means any Runeblade is going to be able to play this card moving forward. Super, super good. And it even allows you, which is often not utilized, it allows you to play non-attack actions on your opponent's turn at instant speed, right? If you can block and mid-combat, probably the most common thing is, instant speed a Sonata Mechanics on their turn, pitching a bunch of cards on your hand and dealing the final blow with arcane damage, if you would. But yes, 3rd on the list. I honestly thought when I started putting this together that it would be a bit higher, but you'll probably understand why when I talk about the other 2. But in 2nd place is another Runeblade card, and that is Bloodsheath Skeleta. So, Bloodsheath Skeleta, it is banned. It is banned currently, right? So that probably speaks to how good this card is. But again, like Courage of Bladehold, it's one of those chess piece equipment that came out in Crucible of War that has temper, which means at the very minimum, you're going to get 3 block value out of this card, which is insane. But where people will probably know this from is its interaction with Sonata Arcanics, where if you're able to build up a bunch of rune chants, you can pop this to pour in a bunch of cost reduction into the Sonata Arcanics and go for one huge turn. So the ceiling is insane on this card from what we've seen players be able to do with it. And as they print more and more cards that have rune chants, it only gets better. Now, like I said, it's currently banned in CC until Viserai gets kicked out, which might be a little bit, might be a little bit of time. But I think, you couldn't have a top 5 equipment list without mentioning Bloodsheath Skeleta, and I think it is fitting for the second spot. And I should say, if it ever does come back, we have a card called Revel in Runeblood, which makes a fair few rune chants for any Runeblade hero. So I think even without Viserai, making rune chants on a stick, I think this card's going to be pretty strong as soon as it comes back into the format. But without further ado, the top spot, number 1 equipment in the game, in my opinion, is Stormstriders. So Stormstriders is the only wizard equipment on this list. We haven't, people will know it from the combination with Aether Wildfire in Kano, and to me, that is the highest ceiling in the game, in my opinion. What that Kano deck can do with the Stormstriders and Aether Wildfire is just mind-blowing. It is probably my favorite deck to watch on coverage because of those sort of turns. It's a real, just a puzzle box that you have to try and figure out. And it's effectively, and I don't really like talking about it this way, but it's kind of like take an extra turn, right? You get to have your turn pass, draw up, and then if you have a Stormstriders in play, in response to whatever your opponent does, you're able to deal a bunch of arcane damage and kill them. So it really breaks that core tenet of your turn, my turn, and outside of some instance, which aren't really dealing damage, when it's your opponent's turn, you're blocking and you're on the defensive. Stormstriders flips that on its head and allows you to consistently play on your opponent's turn and just dish out a ton of arcane damage. Now, it does have Arcane Barrier too, which, isn't, I don't think is as good as block, but obviously tailored for the mirror. It's on flavor. I don't know of many wizards that are carrying a bunch of shields around, so it makes sense that it only has Arcane Barrier. But again, in terms of accessibility, it is a generic wizard card, came to us in Arcane Rising, which means every wizard moving forward, including the likes of Icelander, which we've seen make use of this card. It's obviously a powerhouse in Blitz, even better than it is in CC. Without a doubt, for me, the number 1 equipment in the game is Stormstriders. So there you have it. Top 5 equipment. Obviously, there's some things that didn't make the list. Crown of Seed, so on and so on. Carrion Husk was another thing that I looked at. But for me, Courage of Bladehold, Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, Spellbound Creepers, Bloodsheath Skeleta, and Stormstriders are the top 5 equipment in the game. Let me know if you think I have made some egregious error on that list. But other than that, we'll catch you on the next video.